Underneath the Cenotaph, King Charles led the nation in memory of those who left to battle but never returned. World War II was both tragedy and triumph. Back then, Mervyn Kirsch, Jim Grant and Henry Rice were young soldiers. Today they represent the friends denied the chance to grow old with them. With each year, the line between the past and present gets longer and memory thinner.
The ultimate sacrifice, it was given by the fallen. And that's why we have to remember that. And we just have to keep remembering year on year on year.
The further back in history you go, the less we remember. But look around you today. Are you telling me this is a country that is forgetting its fallen heroes?
Over 100 million people died in World Wars I and II. Today, the Prime Minister and the opposition stood shoulder to shoulder in a procession, paying their respects. We will remember them is the promise. But what does that mean in politically divided times where the lessons of that war are still being revised? The end of the Second World War was the start of a new rights-based international order, underpinned by new institutions and values like the United Nations and the European Convention on Human Rights. But 80 years on, and those very institutions have never looked more politically uncertain.
There is a challenge, and I think it's for our politicians and those that are currently serving to represent us to make sure that those institutions deliver what they were set out to do.
Should we keep the lessons learned previously, or should we adopt them and move on? And I think we should do the latter. We need to remember we're in different times and therefore perhaps change some of the approaches we adopted at the end of the Second World War.
The new consensus appears to be the absence of consensus at all. In a world of new threats, the third member of the war-ending Grand Alliance is mounting a covert one. The authorities say Russia has been sponsoring lo-fi attacks in Europe whilst bombarding Ukraine. Globally, the lessons of war have still not ended them. A human life is still treated far too cheaply. But today is a celebration of its value, lest we forget.
Simeon Brown. Well, so much of our understanding of the First World War comes from the poetry of the time. So much of it written by men on the front line, their lives scarred by battle. But the lives of the women left behind were also changed forever, their voices often unheard. Now a new book features some of the work of overlooked female poets of the day. Commissioned by Maureen Hill, it includes restored photographs from the battleground, which some viewers may find upsetting. I spoke to her earlier about the power of poetry to express the horror of war.
Your battle wounds are scars upon my heart, received when in that grand and tragic show you played your part 2 years ago.
At one with love, at one with grief, blind to the scattered things and changing skies.
Never used to living rough, lots of things he'd got to learn. Wonder if he's warm enough.
When we think of war poetry, we tend to think of the men, but this collection very much represents the women who were left behind quite literally at the time, but their poetry was also not acknowledged in the same way.
No, it wasn't acknowledged. While a number of the male poets had publications immediately after the war, people like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, it wasn't until the 1980s, really, that there was an interest in female literature in general, that some of those poems came into general canon, I suppose. And some of the poets were celebrated at the time. They had, I mean, people like Eleanor Farge and Margaret Poskett Cole and May Wedderburn Cannon were published poets, so they had a reputation. But there are other women who wrote poetry who have come to light.
Do you have a favourite or a favourite couple of lines?
The Vera Brittain poem starts with the line, it's to her brother who actually died not long after she'd written the poem. And she has, the first line of that poem is, your battle wounds are scars on my heart. And I think that's kind of encapsulates that whole feeling of how what was going on at the front transferred to women back home. Yeah.
I mean, the collection is really powerful because obviously there's the poetry, but there are these incredible pictures too.
Yeah.
And they tell a great deal, don't they?
World War I poetry anthologies have tended to use drawings or woodcuts, that type of thing. So it's unusual to get real photographs taken at the time alongside the poems. You get the real sense of reality of what it was like in the trenches, the sort of terrible devastation of the landscape, but also on the home front, you know, that you see the conditions in the hospital, the fashions, the street scenes. It complements the poems, and they're really important, the images.
And how important is it for you that these women take their place in this period?
I think it is really important. And I think not just for the women, it just gives a whole understanding of what it's like for a whole nation to be at war. It's not, obviously there's the experience and the huge sacrifice that the fighting men made, but everybody had to make sacrifices, huge changes, upheavals in society, women doing things that they might have wanted to do in the past but weren't allowed to do, women doing things that perhaps they didn't want to have to do. But it also lets us see how everybody is affected by war. It's not just people at the front. It affects everybody.
Noreen Hill, thanks very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.